So let me ask you about the fact that this shooter...
Special report.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. We are coming on the air because President Biden is about to address the shooting earlier today at a school in Nashville, Tennessee. 3 children and 3 adults were killed. Police say the shooter, a 28-year-old woman, is also dead. As we wait for the president to step up and make remarks, I want to bring in our Pierre Thomas, Chief Justice Correspondent. Pierre, as we wait for the president to address that shooting, once again, another mass shooting in our country. Devastating to report. This time, a female shooter, 28-year-old woman. Unusual.
Highly unusual. And Kira, the scenes that we saw today of those little children, elementary children being let out of that school, 3 of their classmates dead, 3 adults killed at the school. And as you said, the shooter, a 28-year-old woman, heavily armed, 2 assault rifles, a handgun. Police were able to get to the scene very quickly. This could have been much worse. Now law enforcement, we are being told, have identified this woman. They're doing a very detailed look at her background, seeing if she had any social media footprint to figure out why. Why did she show up at that very isolated campus and kill those people?
Brad Garrett, you're former FBI. You're now with us here at ABC. 14 minutes from that 911 call, patrol units were on the scene, made entry, made it to the 2nd floor, heard gunshots, didn't even flinch, engaged that shooter. That shooter, a 28-year-old woman, now dead, only 14 minutes. Pretty amazing response when you think about Uvalde and what happened there.
Right. I mean, it's just amazing how we have moved on in the last 30 years to mass shootings, from going to waiting outside, waiting out shooters, to engaging, training patrol officers to be first responders, carrying heavier guns, go in and follow the gunshots. And that's exactly what they did. So everything seemed to click right, both from a law enforcement standpoint and maybe from a school policy standpoint of training these kids of what to do during an active shooting.
Terry Moran, what does the White House do? What does Congress do? How many more mass shootings do we need to witness?
It seems, Kira, there's no end to the number of mass shootings that the country needs to witness before there are more aggressive ways to stop it through law. One of the things that the president has done, he signed into law the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which did shift the definition of a firearms dealer who is selling firearms. And in March, at the beginning of this month, he signed an executive order that would require more background checks to be performed by those firearms sellers. But he acknowledged it's far short of what Congress could do. Congress could close the gun show loophole altogether. Congress could do other things to make sure that people who are under red flag laws would not get firearms. And yet this Congress and previous Congresses have declined to do it. What we expect to hear from the president is the usual, the heartfelt, anguished expression of sorrow and sympathy over this shooting, and frustration, calling on Congress to do more to keep the country's schools and streets safer.
Speaking of doing more, Pierre Thomas, it's not just about access to guns. How did this 28-year-old woman get access to 2 assault rifles and a handgun? It is a conversation about guns, but also behavioral health. Were there signs? What did others know about this 28-year-old woman? Were there warning signs? There is so much to investigate here, not only into the background of this 28-year-old woman, but also how she got access to these weapons.
Well, Kira, the FBI and ATF are on scene to assist the local police, and there will be a heavy focus on who she is, how she got access to the weapons. And I can tell you, given the frequency of mass shootings, so far 128 this year, that's defined as 4 or more people shot and or killed in a single incident, not including the shooter, compared to 112 last year. These are now becoming commonplace, and law enforcement officials have been, pounding the drum saying, look, People, if you see something, say something. And one of the things we found in so many of these cases, and the FBI and Secret Service and other federal agencies have studied many of these incidents, is that in many cases there were warning signs missed, there were behaviors missed, and the key is how can you connect those disturbing behaviors with the moment when those people somehow get access to weapons, Kira?
And Brad, I'm just thinking about the safety of our schools. As a mom, I have watched my kids, the small school that they attend, and how they have changed security because of these mass shootings. Apparently, the Covenant School also had good security. We're not quite sure how she was able to enter that side door, but how do you know that your school is safe enough? Do you ever know if your school is safe enough?
I think the short answer is no. Should you take all the safeguards you can that are reasonable? Of course you should. Locked doors, maybe metal detectors, although there's some question about their effectiveness in stopping shooters. And you make it a little harder to get into the school, but it's a difficult thing to do, Kara. I mean, think about all the ways you can get into this school, maybe through the church, maybe through the rectory. There's all sorts of ways you can get into the school. But to your question, we need to do all those things. We need to train the kids, like these kids apparently were trained, what to do during a mass shooting. But until two things. Until we figure out a way to create systems within local government that are better
Brad,
able
we're going
to
to take it to the podium now. Brad, the President of the United States speaking now.
My name is Joe Biden. I'm Dr. Joe Biden's husband. And I ate Jenny's ice cream, chocolate chip. I came down because I heard there was chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, I have a whole refrigerator full upstairs. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. God. Ben, how are you, pal? One of the best guys in the United States Congress, Ben Cardin. Folks, welcome to the White House. It's a delight to have you all here. And who are those good-looking kids back there? They're your kids, all four of them? Well, stand up, guys. Well, I want you to know, like you, I had two brothers, three in our family, three brothers, and one sister. My sister is smarter than all of us. Not a joke. She used to be 3 years younger than me. Now she's 23 years younger than me. Yeah. She managed every one of my campaigns for office, even back when I was in high school. We went to the same university 2 years apart. She graduated with honors. I graduated. And we had a simple rule in the family. Listen to Val. My sister Valerie is incredible. So guys, be nice to your sister. You're gonna need her. You're gonna need her, I promise. It's the same lineup. You're the oldest? Who's number two? Number two? Who's number three? You twins? Are you guys twins? Okay. All right, this how it was in our outfit. Well, I'm so glad to see you all. Thanks for coming with Mom, okay? You gotta take care of your mom. Dads are much harder to raise, but, you know. Before I begin to speak, the reason I spent a little time in the kids, I just want to speak very briefly about the school shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. You know, Ben and I have been doing this our whole careers, it seems. And it's just, it's sick. You know, we're still gathering the facts of what happened and why. And we do know that as of now, there are a number of people who did not make it, including children. It's heartbreaking, a family's worst nightmare. And I want to commend the police who responded incredibly swiftly, within minutes, to end the danger. We're monitoring the situation really closely, Ben, as you know. And we have to do more to stop gun violence. It's ripping our communities apart. ripping the soul of this nation, ripping at the very soul of the nation. And we have to do more to protect our schools so they aren't turned into prisons. You know, the shooter in this situation reportedly had 2 assault weapons and a pistol, 2 AK-47. So I call on Congress again to pass my assault weapons ban. It's about time that we began to make some more progress, but there's more to learn. But I just wanted to send my concern and hearts out to so many parents out there. I've been to so many of these sites, as Ben knows, by virtually every one. And one of the things you folks should, I know you do know, but you should focus on, you know, just like when in the military, when my son was in Iraq for a year, other places, there's so many members of the military coming back with post-traumatic stress after witnessing the violence and participating in it. Well, these children, these teachers, they should be focusing on their mental health as well. And so I'm grateful. Anyway, sorry to start off that way, but I couldn't begin without acknowledging what happened. And now I'm grateful that all of you are joining us here today. Natalie, thank you.
And that was the President of the United States addressing the school shooting at Nashville that we have witnessed today. 7 people dead, 3 children, 3 faculty members, including the shooter herself, a 28-year-old woman. Senior national correspondent Terry Moran, the president, once again, calling on Congress and drawing attention to his assault weapons ban. But Terry, it's so much more, clearly, as we continue to witness mass shooting after mass shooting and how it's affecting not just the politics in this country, but our families every single day when we wake up and send our kids off to school.
There's no question that families around the country, my own kids at a school that I can't walk into if I want to bring the lunch to them that they forgot or whatever like that. That is very common these days. The president said he didn't want to see schools turned into prisons, but the lockdown, the security measures around schools are tightening, you know, all across this country. And as for the assault weapons ban, that's DOA in the Republican-held House of Representatives. Republican made that clear. The House Democrats, when they controlled the House of Representatives before the midterm elections, they did pass an assault weapons ban. It got to the Senate, where it died.
David Roush.
Terry, we now go to Metro Nashville Police holding another briefing.
Nashville Fire Director Chief William Swan. Again, this is the second briefing. There will be other briefings to be held here in the same spot later this afternoon. We'll continue to brief throughout the rest of the day. Chief Drake.
First and foremost, I want to say thank you all for being here on this very unfortunate situation. My heart and prayers go out to the families of the 6 people who were tragically injured. What I know at this point is at 10:13 today, officers responded to a shots fired call to Covenant School. It's a church school. Officers immediately responded. A team of 5 immediately went in the school, went to where gunshots were being heard, and engaged the suspect. We have identified the suspect right now, tentatively a 28-year-old female white. We know the address of that person as well, and so we have some ongoing investigations as to that. We have 3 adult victims, and we have 3 children who have been identified, and their families have been contacted. Right now, I will refrain from saying the ages, other than to say I was literally moved to tears to see this and the kids as they were being ushered out of the building. I want to say thanks to all of our partners, to the FBI, to the ATF, and other federal partners, to the THP, Tennessee Highway Patrol, the TBI, the District Attorney, and to the Fire Department. who all came together and seamlessly addressed this situation as quickly as possible. I've already gotten requests from the national media about a great response. We're still assessing that as well. But what I can say and what I've said before is that whenever I hope that we would never have this situation, that if we ever did, we would not wait. We would immediately go in and we would immediately engage the person perpetrating this horrible crime. And so that's all I can say. Right now we have David Roush, director of the TBI, who will come out to me to address his portion. And then we have others that will say something as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
You were just listening to Metro Nashville Police Chief John Drake there confirming what we do know, and that is 7 people are now dead. That includes the shooter, a 28-year-old woman at the Covenant School there in Nashville, Tennessee. It happened at 10:13 Nashville time. But within 14 minutes, local units on patrol responded to that school. 5 of those officers making it to the 2nd floor where they heard gunshots, engaged that shooter, took that shooter down, and the rest of those kids were able to get out of that school alive. Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas. Pierre, a lot more to investigate. Clearly, they now know the address of that 28-year-old woman. Clearly, all of us want to know more about her.
Well, the search will be to look at her phones, look at any computers, talk to family, friends, anyone who can give a sense of her recent history. Did something happen? Was she somehow connected to the school and the church? And again, I will harken back to something that the chief just said. He's talking about the notion that they got to the school, immediately responded, did not wait. Uvalde, which is in the back of everyone's mind, where all those young people lost their lives when police just sat around there for many minutes while the shooter continued to kill. That was abnormal. For years, law enforcement have known and been training and telling school officials that they would come in and respond immediately to engage the shooter, to run toward gunfire. That appears to be what happened in this case, and it probably saved a lot of lives.
Brad Garrett, you're former FBI. You actually worked in the FBI field office there in Nashville, Tennessee. You know this school, a Christian school, 209 students, 40 to 50 faculty member on a regular day, a faithful community. I had a chance to talk to a young man whose mom worked at that school for 20 years, saying it was pretty remarkable what happened there with regard to even fellow officers praying with members of this community. It could have been so much worse. 3 children killed, 3 faculty killed, but within 14 minutes, they got more than 100 other kids out of that school. It's pretty remarkable when you think about that compared to what we saw at Uvalde.
Oh, there is no doubt. And that is where we have gotten in the last 20 to 30 years, is training the police to immediately go enter a school, enter a factory, enter wherever there's a mass shooting going on, quickly pick up whatever intel there might be, what the shooter looks like, type of weapons, so forth and so on, and they go in. It's very little information typically when you go in, Kara, but you follow the gunshots, and they did. It took them to the 2nd floor, and they engaged the shooter. And you know, these types of shooters tend to go and kill as many people as they can. And another 2 minutes could have been another 15 kids. It's unbelievable with even a semi-automatic assault weapon like an AR-15 or an AK-47. You can fire off so many rounds in just a few seconds. And if you have folks in an enclosed classroom, I mean, sadly, you know the outcome.
And clearly, this is, Brad, going to have schools across the country once again reevaluating the security at school and also the training that they need to do. We are living in a totally different world right now.
There is no doubt. And I don't like saying this, but it's not going to get any better.
Pierre, Brad, thank you so much. We, of course, will continue to follow this developing story. throughout the day. Our coverage continues now on ABC News Live. I'm Kira Phillips.
This has been a special report from ABC News. Whenever news breaks,
the crush of families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
In Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live, streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news. This is where the newsmakers come first in the morning to be heard. America's #1 morning show.
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000.
Yeah.
Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
Wherever the story, ABC's Good Morning America is right there. America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now.
Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. We begin tonight here in Buffalo, London, in Alaska,
Uvalde, Kentucky, from Poland, Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. Did you ever have a conversation about an abortion? Is she lying?
Do you have a political aspiration?
Absolutely.
You ready for this? Go! You're going to deliver a show that will be remembered forever.
Ooh, the pressure on me.
You are just a tough, bad. This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the Capitol, destructive Cat 4 storm.
We're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Moran, and we're following breaking news, that deadly school shooting in Nashville today.
We are staying on top of all the latest details, and we have mixed minus in our ears. If we could go ahead and fix that so we don't have an echo, thank you very much. We are following this breaking news story out of Nashville, Tennessee. 7 people reported dead. It happened at 10:13 Nashville time. Within 14 minutes, units were there on the scene at the Covenant School in Nashville. You see the children there, the lucky ones who survived that shooting. A 28-year-old woman had come in the side door of that school, worked her way from the first floor opening fire to the second floor opening fire. Once those police officers got to the scene, they didn't even hesitate, worked their way up where they heard the gunshots, engaged the shooter. That shooter was shot dead. Response team was brought to the scene as well, started working on the children there inside the school, got them transported immediately. Unfortunately, 3 children died, 3 faculty members died. the shooter there dying as well. This, Terry, was a pretty remarkable moment when one of the members of the police department joined with two individuals, I think one responding medically and another possibly tied to the school, one of the faculty members, praying there at the scene after that shooting took place.
Well, it's perfectly reasonable response to this situation, and in some ways more than the government has been able to achieve. Let's go to Pierre Thomas, our justice correspondent on this. First, Pierre, bring us up to date on how federal authorities are looking at this shooting and on how the government can respond to the broader problem. Look, we did last year, the Congress passed and Joe Biden signed the most sweeping gun safety bill in 30 years, and it didn't really do that much. It increased background checks on people under 21, did a couple of things, but what else is in the government's ability to do to address this? But first, the case at hand. What are you hearing?
Well, right now, we just got confirmation that the Attorney General has been briefed on the case. He laid out how the FBI and ATF are on the scene. Specifically, what the FBI will typically offer to do is help to control the crime scene, to come up with a system for recovering every shell casing, every bit of evidence at the scene, to chronicle it so that it will be available for the local police who remain the lead in this case. The ATF will do a trace on the gun to see where the guns came from, and all law enforcement agencies right now will have this person's name. We have a name that we're not ready to publish yet that law enforcement is looking at. They will essentially vacuum clean this woman's recent history. They'll try to find out, did she have a job? Where did she work? Did she have any ties to the school? Did she have any ties to the church? All those kinds of bits of information will be put together to develop a profile and to try to get a sense of what the motivation was. What was the motive for going in and killing children? Those images we saw of those little elementary age children being, ushered out of that school are heartbreaking to see. But right now, law enforcement needs to understand who this woman is, make sure she had no support, and begin to get a sense of were there any warning signs missed. But the broader problem, Terry and Kira, remains that we're now seeing mass shootings defined as 4 or more people shot and or killed in a single incident now becoming a part of the national norm. So far this year, we're just 3 months into the year, there have been 128 mass shootings. Same period this time last year, 112. So this is an ongoing issue. It's not only a law enforcement issue, it's becoming a public health issue because in one of the recent years, death by gunfire was the leading cause of death of young people in this country.
It is sad to hear you say, Pierre, this has become the national norm. It's sad that we even have to continue to cover these mass shootings and mention that this has become normal life for all of us. What wasn't normal, what was unusual, is the shooter was a woman, a 28-year-old woman.
Overwhelmingly, the shooters in these kinds of incidents tend to be men, male, for a variety of reasons and motives. Often troubled, many times having mental health issues, sometimes diagnosed, sometimes not diagnosed. And the pattern that we often see is there typically are missed signals, things and behaviors exhibited, social media posts that were not acted upon by loved ones and or peers. There typically is something. And I dare to say we won't be surprised if in the coming days we find posts, conversations, behaviors that were noted. And again, the critical missing factor often is how do you marry those kind of behaviors with the moment that those people get access to the weapons?
Let's bring in Brad Garrett, our companion, along with Pierre and others on these shootings so often, so tragically often. And Brad, I want to pick up where we left off on this shooter, not only a woman, but an older person, 28. It seems to me that a lot of these school shootings are perpetrated by insiders, students often, or recently, students who recently left the school. What do you make of this, of how unusual this is?
Well, I think you have, yes, that's true, Terry, but you have to look at probably what her motive is. Does she have some connection to this school? Did she have issues at this school, either as a student, or did she work there, or did she belong to the church that's connected to the school? We'll have to see how that sorts out. But if you look at the progression of mass shooters, they go through this, in some are longer than others, this what I would call an incubation period, where they get more angry, they get more isolated, they acquire weapons, and they are convinced that taking revenge is the only way that they're going to feel powerful, that they're going to sort of take back their life. Just think about how far you'd have to be gone to even think that way. But when she went into that school today, Terry, like most mass shooters, they don't really care who they're shooting because they don't see those people as human beings. They see them as somebody that has harmed them in some way. I realize that makes absolutely no sense, but that's what goes through. That's how they rationalize. Everything is externalized. It's somebody else's fault. I've been driven to this point. That's what's going through their minds. And so when she went in there today, this was all to seek A, fame, power, and revenge.
So much more that we want to know on why she'd want to do that. I mean, open fire on preschool to sixth graders in the small Christian school there, and it described as an idyllic, beautiful place inside the hillside there in Nashville. Elizabeth Newman, you work for the Department of Homeland Security. Mass shootings, it was something you studied. It was something that you put together prevention plans for. And time again, you are watching this right along with us as well. And, you know, we can talk about all the gun control till we're blue in the face, but we know it's more than that, that behavioral, mental health is a tremendous part of this as well, and we're just not doing enough.
That's right, Kiara. I mean, I think one of the things that I would hope that every state governor, and for that matter, every private Christian school that is looking at what happened today and having that aha moment of, oh, this could happen to us too. I hope they go to their governor and say, we've got to do better. And we don't even have to talk about the guns. We could just be doing better by educating the community on the signs and indicators of somebody that might be mobilizing to violence. We could be doing better by expanding mental health, behavioral health, and social services capacities to be able to help those before they cross a criminal threshold. We could be doing better by creating referral systems so that people know if they do see something that concerns them, they can call something other than 911. I will never forget, I was serving at DHS when El Paso happened. And when we started to get the information about the shooter, the thing that just struck my heart cold was that the mother had called 911 and said, my son is starting to purchase weapons and I'm concerned. And the 911's operator's answer was, well, that's his constitutional right. He's over 18, right? So we've got to find a better way to be looking at these problem sets and helping people before they cross that criminal threshold. Law enforcement has been doing tremendous work trying to keep us all safe, but it's not fair to put all of this on them. We have got to be engaging with people where the sickness starts, where the grievance starts to take hold. And they, as Brad said, like by the time they get to that place where they are shooting, they have dehumanized. They look at the people that they're killing as the problem, the thing that is creating the suffering that they're experiencing. And yes, you might think of that as mentally ill, but the data tells us that most shooters, most mass attackers, and certainly people that become violent extremists, they're not any more mentally ill than the average population. Now, that doesn't mean that they're healthy. They're somewhere in between. So we need to get people help. We need to recognize that, I mean, look, we've just been through a chaotic few years. The pandemic really wreaked havoc on a lot of us. In ways that that doesn't mean that we're all going to go commit acts of mass violence, but it was just really, really hard. And for some it was harder. And for some, that isolation created the space for them to go online and start to ideate about how violence is their answer, how violence is going to relieve them of their suffering. We have got to identify and help those people well before they cross that criminal threshold. And the place where that needs to happen is at the state level. The federal government can help with research, with funding, with best practices, but each state needs to set up the capability, the capacity to be doing this prevention, this intervention. And there are a few states that have started. I don't know the status of Tennessee, but certainly I hope that this would motivate them to move faster to build out that prevention capacity at a state level.
Well, it's definitely something that we will follow up on and have that discussion. But just to recap and take you back to 10:13 this morning in Nashville, Tennessee, what you're seeing here, 7 people dead, including the shooter, a 28-year-old woman at the Covenant School there in Nashville. Here's the 911 call that began the police response.
Male white camo, and they're actually hearing gunfire, so be advised. Stay out of the general area of Burton Hills Road, Hillsboro Pike, confirmed active shooter.
Metro Midtown is on a school shooting. 4 of multiple victims down. We are monitoring Metro radio traffic at this time, unknown which school or where they're transporting, but it sounds like there's multiple victims down inside the school. Shooter is down as now as well. Multiple victims down. They will be sending them to VCH. This time, all radio traffic will be kept to a minimum except for emergency situations only.
So apparently the Covenant School, not far from downtown Nashville, so there were units there very close to the school. So once that 911 call came in, they responded so quickly. Within 14 minutes, they were able to secure that school. They engaged with the shooter.
They engaged, right?
Correct. They didn't wait. They didn't hesitate.
Is the protocol that's supposed to be there. Let's bring in Pierre Thomas once again on that. And on something else, we're focusing on mental health as we should be, Pierre, because of so many of these shootings are obviously the result of mental health. But we've seen mass shootings because of hate as well, right? Synagogues. Is it possible, is there any indication that because this was a Christian school, there are people who hate Christians as well, disturbed people. Is there any indication that it could be along those lines?
Well, right now we have no indication of that, but again, it's early in this investigation. I think one of the main things that law enforcement will look for is ties to the school. I believe the police chief described the white female shooter. Again, the key is the facts as they present themselves. What do the facts say about this person? What do the facts say about this particular shooter? Now, the unfortunate thing about mass shootings in this country is that you can literally look to every genre of American life, places that we used to hold as safe, be it synagogues. We had a mass shooting in Pittsburgh, which was based on hate. We had the shooting in Charleston, South Carolina, where the black people were killed simply for being black. El Paso, the shooter was angry about immigration. Movie theaters. Every public square that one can imagine has now been the subject of mass shootings. And again, the question becomes over and over again, what will the country decide is reasonable to do about this when in a country where there are 300 million guns already in circulation? So if another gun was never sold in this country, you still have 300 million guns, and I always say they're not biodegradable. They're still out there. The question is, what do we do? What can the country do to keep guns out of the hands of people that will use them to kill and harm others? That is the fundamental question that the country continues to grapple with. And many law enforcement officials say, look, when we look at urban centers and we look at domestic violence cases, there's just thousands of people being shot in this country every single year, fatally shot. And the question is, how we normalize that to the point where, you know, people just aren't willing to do additional steps to do anything about it.
It looks like we're getting word now, Pierre, that the Nashville shooter, the 28-year-old woman who entered the Covenant School, shooting 6 people, 3 faculty members, 3 children, was at one point a student at the school.
Again, I've not seen
ahead.
that reporting yet, but Kara, that again, those are the kind of strands that we often see. There's usually some connection, something that draws this obviously very troubled person back to that scene. And sometimes there's a coherent reason for this sort of activity that we can discern and understand, and sometimes there simply is not. It's just wanton violence. And again, I think before we saw the shootings in the past at high schools, I think Newtown, with the level and the number of the children shot there, was the first time we really saw little children in any kind of massive way that affected the national consciousness. You heard the police chief say today that he was moved to tears seeing the children leave that school and knowing that 3 of their classmates were dead.
And Brad Garrett, they're just picking up on that, as if it couldn't get worse, the plague of school shootings and gun violence. It does seem as if now we are seeing increased numbers of people taking out their anguish, their hatred on the littlest of people, of children. And it is, and I'd just like to go to what, just before we get to that, Pierre, if I could go to the sound that Pierre was just mentioning about that.
Team of 5 immediately went in the school, went to where gunshots were being heard, and engaged the suspect. We have identified the suspect right now, tentatively a 28-year-old female white. We know the address of that person as well, and so we have some ongoing investigations as to that. We have 3 adult victims, and we have 3 children who have been identified, and their families have been contacted. Right now, I will refrain from saying the ages, other than to say I was literally moved to tears to see this and the kids as they were being ushered out of the building.
And so, Brad, it does seem that there's a virus loose in the violent in this country, that they'll sacrifice the children to relieve their anguish or something. It sounds nuts, but now it's the littlest that are being targeted.
But probably, Terry, this shooter wasn't thinking about that they were small, young people. It's what they represent to the shooter as to why she went into that school. And if you go back to Sandy Hook and look at Adam Lanza, he goes back, you know, and he's older, goes back to the elementary school and kills 26 people. And so it's what that represents in their mind as to what happened to them as a child there. Again, their perception that they feel like they were wronged and that they were going to make a wrong into a right in their mind. And that's why she probably went back there in some form or fashion. So again, you have to think of this as dehumanization as to every person or child she shot. It's what they represent in her mind, and that she was going to seek revenge today, and sadly she did.
And the President of the United States speaking out moments ago. Let's take a listen.
I just want to speak very briefly about the school shooting in Nashville, Tennessee. You know, Ben and I have been doing this our whole careers, it seems. And it's just, it's sick. You know, we're still gathering the facts of what happened and why. And we do know that as of now, there are a number of people who are did not make it, including children. And we have to do more to protect our schools so they aren't turned into prisons. You know, the shooter in this situation reportedly had 2 assault weapons and a pistol, 2 AK-47. So I call on Congress again to pass my assault weapons ban. It's about time that we begin to make some more progress, but there's more to learn. But I just wanted to send my concern and hearts out to so many parents out there.
And it will raise the discussion, of course. Once again, it does every time about the weapons ban, in addition to mental health. But Elizabeth Newman, you worked in the Department of Homeland Security. We talk about this every single year. So at what point does something get done? And what, in your eyes, as someone who's been right there within the White House and an administration working on these types of issues, what is the next move?
I don't have a lot of hope that Congress has the ability to be serious and actually get something done. That doesn't mean they shouldn't try. That is their job, and they should. But I tend to think that the nature of our politics at the moment is so performative and unserious that the place that I choose to spend my energy is at the state level and at the grassroots, where I think we have some opportunity to actually make some progress in making certain communities and certain states safer. And that can be both from a gun control perspective as well as investing in prevention. And there are some places where the work is underway. But I want to be very clear, the concept of prevention is something that will take at least a decade to build out. These are not simple fixes because this is not a simple problem. It is very complex. And the nature of our country, we don't, because of both the First and Second Amendment, it is harder to be able to help people when they are in need of assistance, in need of intervention. So I'm not suggesting that we get rid of the Constitution at all. I love that we live in this country. It does make security harder, and so it will take longer for us to build out the capability to be able to detect when somebody is in need of assistance, to be able to build those referral systems and have the mental health and behavioral health professionals available to do that intervention work and to manage the risk. But I think we've got to start, and we have to do it with speed, with intensity, so that 10 years from now, we're looking at a very different experience in this country. I don't think, I mean, if you can imagine my elementary school kids when they are parents, like surely by then, we can stop this, right? We can make this something that we talk about as an epidemic of the past. I think if we set our sights on, let's look at generational change here, we can make a difference. Unfortunately, I don't think that difference is going to happen in Washington, D.C. I wish it could. I think we have to focus on the grassroots, on changing hearts and minds, that we can do reasonable gun control that is not taking away your Second Amendment rights, that we can do prevention and intervention in a way that respects people's civil rights and civil liberties, but also gets people the help that they need. We can do this, but we've got to start investing now, and we need to be focusing on the states and at the grassroots level to make that change.
Thank you, Elizabeth. If I can pick up on that with Pierre. So the states are moving. Illinois this year under Governor J.B. Pritzker became the 9th state to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in that state. There's definitional issues around that, of course. But there are 9 states that have done that. There are states that have done other things on mental health. New York State, after the Buffalo shooting, increased the age requirement for owning a long gun from 18 to 21. So states are on the move. Now, with the conservative Supreme Court, it's anybody's guess how many of those laws survive. But as you cover this issue, as you have so much, do you see the frustration that Elizabeth is talking about, that so many have, resulting in more grassroots and state-level action?
Well, I think the state of Michigan is also considering some additional gun control measures. What I do sense is, in recent years, law enforcement has become pretty unanimous in their concern that they're sometimes at scenes and outgunned. And their voice, I'm not quite sure why their voice has not been heard in terms of Congress, in terms of really listening to police. Members of Congress are always talking about how they love police and want to support law enforcement. This is one area where law enforcement has been pretty unanimous in that they want to have officers at the scene better equipped than the people that they're confronting. That is a very important factor to see. But as a number of you have mentioned, gun control, or the lack thereof, has been one of the most divisive issues in this country. And the country has, the Second Amendment that many people revere and embrace, and there are others who say there need to be some limitations on the kinds of weapons that people have access to, and at least to have a better sense of who has weapons and training. When I was covering this story many years ago, one of the things that law enforcement officials would often say is that, isn't it amazing that you get more training to drive a car than you do for a person who wants to have access to an assault rifle or weapon in many cases. At one point when I was doing that investigative work, there were more firearms dealers than there were gas stations in the country. So this is the kind of issue that the country continues to wrestle with no clear solution or ending in sight.
Pierre, Elizabeth, Brad, appreciate you three so much and just staying with us from the very beginning on this story. And as we continue, of course, to get more details about the investigation into that 20-year-old woman who entered that school, killing 6 people.
We'll continue to be covering this. I'm Tara Mann. We'll continue to monitor all the latest out of Nashville. 3 adults, 3 children dead after another mass shooting at a school, an elementary school. We're going to bring you the latest as this story develops, of course.
We also have full coverage on World News Tonight and on Prime with Lindsay Davis, both live from storm damage in Mississippi, covering the deadly shooting as well. The news keeps coming. Keep it right here.
Whenever news breaks,
the crush of families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
In Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story.
Here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is. We're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the right now. Been a nationwide teacher